What you did out there was just beyond ridiculous, just beyond stupid.
That was the judge going in on Rashee Rice, and it felt like an attack. After causing a high-speed crash that left innocent people injured, the NFL star finally faced the courtroom. What happened next was brutal. Let's break it all down. Courtroom chaos. Picture this, July 17th, 2025. A Dallas courtroom packed with reporters, victims, and attorneys. Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice stands before Judge Ernest White, facing the consequences of a decision that changed multiple lives forever. But what happened in that courtroom that day would expose a level of legal manipulation and celebrity privilege that will leave you absolutely stunned. Let me set the stage for you. Rice was originally facing 8 felony charges, 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 count of collision involving serious bodily injury, and 6 counts of collision involving injury, stemming from a March 30th, 2024 incident where he was driving a Lamborghini at 119 miles per hour through Dallas rush hour traffic, causing a devastating multi-car crash that injured multiple innocent people. These weren't minor charges. The aggravated assault charge alone carried a potential sentence of 2 to 20 years in prison. We're talking about someone who could have spent decades behind bars for his reckless actions. But what actually happened in that courtroom defies all logic and reason. The original plea deal included no jail time, just restitution and 5 years of probation. You heard that correctly. The original plea deal negotiated by Rice's high-powered legal team included absolutely 0 jail time, 0, for causing a crash at 119 miles per hour that could have killed multiple people, for fleeing the scene without helping a single victim, for 8 felony charges that destroyed innocent lives. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The judge in the case, Judge Ernest White, wasn't having any of it.
As a condition of probation, I'm ordering you to serve 30 days in the county jail as a condition of probation. I'm not ordering you into custody to...
The judge looked at this proposed sweetheart deal and said absolutely not. He felt that Rice needed some jail time as a consequence for his actions, especially given how he had fled the scene without even trying to help the people he had injured.
What you did out there was just beyond ridiculous, just beyond stupid.
Finally, someone in a position of authority was calling out Rice's actions for what they really were, beyond ridiculous and beyond stupid. The judge wasn't impressed by Rice's celebrity status or his expensive legal team. He saw the case for what it was, a reckless act that could have killed multiple innocent. Rashee Rice pleads guilty in Dallas crash, sentenced to 5 years probation. But even with the judge's intervention, the final sentence was still remarkably lenient. On July 17, 2025, Rice pleaded guilty to 2 third-degree felony charges, collision involving serious bodily injury, and racing on a highway causing bodily injury. In exchange, the remaining charges, including the second-degree felony aggravated assault and 6 misdemeanor counts, were dismissed. The final sentence, 30 days in jail, which can be served at any time during a 5-year probation period, and 5 years of deferred probation. If Rice successfully completes his probation, the case will be dismissed and no conviction will appear on his criminal record. Let me break down just how incredible this deal really is. Rice was facing potentially decades in prison on the original charges. The aggravated assault charge alone carried a potential sentence of 2 to 20 years. Instead, he gets 30 days that he can serve whenever it's convenient for him, and if he behaves himself, the whole thing goes away.
The case being transferred there now, Mr. Rice will arrive there Monday to prepare for training for the next season. But as a Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver, these cases now won't interfere with the coming football season.
Did you catch that? The timing was so convenient that it wouldn't even interfere with football season. How's that for justice? The lawsuits that followed the crash reveal a level of human suffering that is almost unimaginable. Edvard Petrovsky and Irina Gromova filed a lawsuit on April 11, 2024 in Dallas County District Court seeking $1 million in actual damages and $10 million in punitive damages. But the monetary figures don't even begin to tell the real story. These victims suffered brain trauma, facial lacerations requiring stitches, multiple contusions, disfigurement, internal bleeding, injuries that would have permanent, life-altering consequences. We're talking about people who will never be the same again because a millionaire NFL player wanted to show off his expensive car. But that wasn't the end of the lawsuits. Kamlesh Desai filed a separate lawsuit in April 2024, seeking over $1 million for damages including injury, anguish, and impairment. And then, more than a year later, Kayla Quinn filed a third lawsuit in May 2025, alleging physical and mental injuries to herself and her son, seeking between $250,000 and $1 million in damages. Think about that timeline for a moment. We're talking about victims who are still filing lawsuits more than a year after the crash, still dealing with the physical, emotional, and financial consequences of Rice's actions. These aren't frivolous lawsuits. These are people whose lives were destroyed by someone's reckless decision to street race in rush hour traffic. But the financial aspect of this case tells an even more disturbing story. Rice paid $115,481.91 in restitution to cover victims' medical expenses prior to the plea, which likely contributed to the lenient sentence. However, this is where things get really shady. Remember victim Catherine Kuykendall? She reached a $1,086,000 settlement with Rice in July 2025, but Rice has not paid the agreed amount. Even more shocking, Rice allegedly claimed to have no money when pressed about the payment. Think about the audacity of that claim. This is a professional athlete with a 4-year contract worth $6.4 million, with $3.5 million guaranteed, and he's claiming he has no money to pay the victims of his reckless driving. Kuykendall's attorney is now prepared to pursue wage garnishment to force Rice to pay what he owes. The delay tactics in this case were equally frustrating for victims seeking justice. The trial for the Petrovsky and Gromova case was initially scheduled for June 23, 2025, but was rescheduled to January 20th, 2026, due to a legislative continuance requested by Rice's attorney Royce West, citing his duties as a state senator. So not only did Rice get an incredibly lenient criminal sentence, but his victims have to wait even longer for any hope of civil justice because his attorney has political obligations. The system seems designed to protect the wealthy and powerful while leaving victims hanging in limbo. But the courtroom drama wasn't limited to just the criminal case. During the plea hearing, Rice's attorney painted a picture of a young man who had learned from his mistakes and was committed to making things right.
Prior to this accident, Rashee Rice had not been involved in criminal activities before, no prior convictions, and worked to be, frankly, a law-abiding citizen just like many of us here today. That's why he's so deeply saddened by the behavior that he was involved in. It was reckless.
West emphasized Rice's clean record and portrayed the crash as an aberration, a youthful indiscretion that shouldn't define his client's future. But critics would argue that this narrative conveniently ignores the severity of what happened and the lasting impact on victims. The public statement released after the sentencing tried to strike a remorseful tone. There have been a lot of sleepless nights thinking about the damages my actions caused, and I will continue working within my means to make sure everyone impacted will be made whole. I urge everyone to mind the speed limit, drive safe, and drive smart. I'm profoundly sorry, but actions speak louder than words, and Rice's actions after the sentencing, particularly his alleged refusal to pay the settlement, suggest that his remorse might be more about protecting his image than genuinely making things right for his victims. Let me explain how we got here. The crash that changed everything. Now, when I tell you that March 30th, 2024 was the day that changed everything for Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice, I'm not exaggerating even slightly. Picture this. It's a beautiful Saturday evening in Dallas, Texas. Rush hour traffic is moving along North Central Expressway. Families are heading home from their day out, and completely unsuspecting drivers are just trying to get to their destination safely. What they didn't know was that their lives were about to be forever altered by a decision that would defy all logic and reason.
There's no precedent for this under the personal conduct policy. There's no street racing incident in a major city that resulted in multiple injuries and 8 felony counts with a guilty plea to 2 of them.
That's right. What happened on that fateful evening was so unprecedented that even NFL experts admitted they had never seen anything quite like it before. But let me paint you the complete picture of what transpired that day, because the details are absolutely staggering. At approximately 6:20 p.m., as families were wrapping up their weekend activities, Rashee Rice was behind the wheel of a rented 2020 Lamborghini Urus SUV, traveling at a mind-boggling 119 miles per hour on a highway with a posted speed limit of just 70 miles per hour. But here's where it gets even more insane. He wasn't alone in this reckless display. Theodore Teddy Knox, a 21-year-old cornerback from SMU and Rice's former teammate, was driving a Corvette registered to Rice at 116 miles per hour, slowing to 91 miles per hour just 1 second before the collision that would change multiple lives forever. Now, I want you to really think about this for a moment. These weren't empty highways in the middle of nowhere. This was North Central Expressway during rush hour traffic, with innocent families, children, and hardworking people just trying to get home. The sheer audacity and complete disregard for human life is almost incomprehensible.
I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it because it came out of nowhere. I was just driving, minding my business, and I was shocked.
That voice you just heard belongs to one of the victims, a mother who was driving with her 4-year-old son when their world was turned upside down in an instant. But we'll get to her heartbreaking story in just a moment. The crash itself reads like something out of an action movie, except this was terrifyingly real. According to the Dallas Police Department crash report, Knox's Corvette attempted to move from the far left lane onto the left-hand shoulder, where Rice's Lamborghini was already driving. The impact was devastating. Rice's Lamborghini spun counterclockwise after hitting the center median wall, collided with a third vehicle, then spun clockwise, striking another vehicle, and finally came to rest in the right middle lane. But the nightmare was just beginning. The crash triggered a chain reaction involving 6 vehicles total, with dashcam footage captured by witness Kayla Quinn showing vehicles spinning and flipping across the highway in what police described as a spaghetti bowl-like series of collisions. The human cost of this reckless decision was immediate and devastating. At least 4 people were injured in the crash, with 2 drivers treated at the scene by Dallas Fire Rescue for minor injuries, and 2 occupants of another vehicle transported to a local hospital. But those numbers don't tell the full story of the trauma and pain that would follow.
I just boom, just got hit. And then I just, like all I hear is a lot of commotion, and everyone kind of flew ahead of me. Because you can kind of see in the video, they kind of flew ahead of me. And it was just a lot. It was a lot. Overwhelming, like scary.
But what happened next is what really shows the character, or lack thereof, of the people involved in this incident. Here's where this story takes a turn that will absolutely shock you. Instead of staying at the scene, instead of checking on the victims they had just potentially killed, instead of taking any responsibility whatsoever, Rice, Knox, and 3 other passengers from the Lamborghini and Corvette fled the scene on foot without checking on the victims or providing their information.
Oh, it took me like 2 minutes because they left the scene fast. They left fast, like it boom, boom, boom. I kind of seen in the mirror someone getting put out of one of the cars, and they just walked away. They wasn't there that long. Probably like 2 minutes of the accident happened. That's how fast they were there and how fast they left. They left the scene.
Think about that for a moment. These grown men, one of them a professional athlete making millions of dollars, caused a crash that could have killed multiple people. And their immediate instinct wasn't to help, wasn't to take responsibility, wasn't to ensure everyone was okay. Their instinct was to run away like cowards. Dashcam footage showed 5 men walking away along the shoulder, reportedly heading toward a nearby train station, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation and chaos. But the victims weren't going to let this slide. One victim, whose voice we heard earlier, put it perfectly when she said she was left stranded on the highway with her 4-year-old son for about 5 hours, waiting for police to process the scene while the perpetrators had long since disappeared. The pain she felt was palpable, and it gets even worse when you hear what this crash did to her young son.
You know, I'm scared, Mommy. They hit us. We want a new car. We can't drive. I'm really scared, Mom. Are you okay? Are you sad? You know, but my son, he's still like talking about it, like I'm scared, Mommy. I don't want to get in the car. I don't want to drive.
A 4-year-old child traumatized by the reckless actions of adults who should have known better. This innocent little boy now has anxiety about getting in cars because of what Rashee Rice and Theodore Knox did that day. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Dallas police responded to the crash around 6:25 p.m. CT and quickly identified the Lamborghini as rented and the Corvette as registered to Rashee Rice, making him an immediate suspect in the investigation. But Rice didn't turn himself in immediately. In fact, he didn't cooperate with police until April 3rd, 4 days after the crash, when the heat was getting too intense to ignore any longer. What's particularly damning is what police found when they searched the vehicles. Marijuana, a Chiefs playbook, a $16,500 check, and credit cards were found in the vehicles, painting a picture of someone living a lifestyle completely disconnected from the reality of consequences. And let's talk about those consequences, because they were swift and severe. An arrest warrant was issued for Rice on April 10th, 2024, and he turned himself into police the following day, April 11th. The charges, 8 criminal charges total, 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 count of collision involving serious bodily injury, and 6 counts of collision involving injury. But as we already saw, the legal battle was just beginning, and what happened in the courtroom would be almost as dramatic as the crash itself. The victims weren't going to let Rice and Knox get away with what they had done, and the lawsuits that followed revealed just how devastating this crash really was for the innocent people whose lives were forever changed by one moment of unthinkable recklessness. The NFL aspect of this story adds another layer of complexity. While Rice was avoiding serious criminal consequences, the league was watching closely, waiting for the legal process to play out before making their own disciplinary decision. The aftermath and shocking revelations. As Rice was celebrating his incredibly lenient sentence, the victims of his reckless actions were still fighting for justice and dealing with the ongoing consequences of that fateful day in March 2024. But what we discovered about Rice's past behavior patterns would paint a picture of someone who had been getting away with dangerous and violent behavior for years. Let's start with what should have been a straightforward matter: Rice actually paying the victims what he owed them. Remember, Rice had agreed to a $1,086,000 settlement with victim Catherine Kuykendall, but when it came time to pay up, Rice allegedly claimed to have no money. This is where the story gets truly outrageous. Here's a professional athlete making millions of dollars a year, driving around in rented Lamborghinis, and when it comes time to compensate the people whose lives he destroyed, suddenly he's broke. Kuykendall's attorney filed a breach of contract petition and indicated readiness to pursue wage garnishment if necessary. The message this sends to victims is absolutely devastating. It's essentially saying, I can destroy your life with my reckless behavior, agree to pay you for the damage I caused, and then just refuse to pay because I know you can't do anything about it. It's a level of arrogance and disrespect that is truly breathtaking. But while Rice was playing games with victim settlements, the NFL was finally ready to weigh in on the situation. The league had been monitoring the case throughout the legal proceedings, and now that the criminal case was resolved, they were prepared to impose their own discipline.
There's the Justin Tucker outcome, there's the Deshaun Watson outcome. And the Tucker outcome goes like this. The league proposes a suspension to Rice.
The NFL had two basic paths they could take with Rice's discipline. They could negotiate a suspension directly with Rice and his representatives, similar to how they handled other cases. Or they could go the more formal route with hearings and appeals if Rice decided to fight the punishment.
Whatever the league offers, whatever the league proposes by way of a suspension is too much for Rashee Rice. And he says, no, I will pursue my rights.
But here's the thing about Rice's case. The evidence was so overwhelming that fighting it would have been pointless. The dash cam footage, the police reports, the guilty plea, everything was right there in black and white. There was no denying what happened. The NFL's personal conduct policy allows them to discipline players even when criminal charges are resolved with plea deals. And Rice's case was exactly the type of behavior the policy was designed to address. Street racing at 119 miles per hour, causing multiple injuries and fleeing the scene. These actions clearly brought disrepute to the league. Sources indicated that Rice was likely facing a multi-game suspension, with estimates ranging from 2 to 7 games. The exact length would depend on various factors, including Rice's cooperation, his expression of remorse, and the league's desire to send a message about reckless behavior. But just when you thought this story couldn't get any more shocking, revelations about Rice's past behavior began to surface that would make you question how he was ever allowed to continue playing professional football in the first place. The first additional incident came to light in May 2024, just 2 months after the devastating crash. Rice was investigated for allegedly assaulting a photographer at a Dallas nightclub on May 6, 2024. The photographer claimed Rice punched him, causing non-life-threatening injuries, including facial swelling. What's particularly disturbing about this incident is the alleged setup. According to the police report, Rice allegedly messaged the photographer via Instagram at 1:55 a.m., asking him to return to the nightclub under the premise of being hired to take photographs. When the photographer returned around 2 a.m., Rice allegedly assaulted him. So we're talking about someone who allegedly lured a victim back to a location under false pretenses and then attacked them. That's not a spur-of-the-moment decision. That's premeditated violence. While the photographer later signed an affidavit of non-prosecution and no charges were filed, the pattern of behavior was becoming increasingly clear. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In May 2024, reports surfaced about an alleged incident during Rice's time at SMU, where he or someone associated with him allegedly fired multiple bullets into the empty vehicle of former SMU basketball player Kendrick Davis. The motive was reportedly jealousy over a perceived relationship between Davis and Rice's girlfriend. Think about the escalation here. We're talking about an alleged shooting incident that was never reported to local authorities by SMU, but was known to multiple NFL teams during the pre-draft process for the 2023 NFL Draft. When asked about the team's knowledge of this incident, Chiefs head coach Andy Reid gave a tellingly vague response. We knew enough to draft him, and then we just went with the process and we found that it was satisfactory for us. So the Chiefs knew about an alleged shooting incident and still decided to draft Rice. They knew about his character concerns and still gave him a multi-million-dollar contract. This raises serious questions about the NFL's commitment to player conduct and public safety. The pattern that emerges from these incidents is deeply troubling. We have alleged gun violence in college, a devastating high-speed crash that injured multiple people, an alleged assault at a nightclub, and throughout it all, a consistent pattern of Rice using his wealth and influence to avoid serious consequences. What makes this even more frustrating is how Rice and his representatives tried to control the narrative. During the sentencing hearing, his attorney painted him as a young man who had made a mistake and learned from it. But actions speak louder than words, and Rice's subsequent behavior, refusing to pay settlements, allegedly assaulting someone just months after the crash, suggests that he hadn't learned anything at all. The response from Rice's teammates and the Chiefs organization has been telling in its restraint. While some publicly supported him, the comments were carefully measured and focused more on his potential for growth than defending his actions. Even in casual conversations, you could sense the disappointment and concern from those around him. The Chiefs had invested in Rice not just as a player, but as a representative of their organization, and his off-field behavior was becoming a major liability. The fantasy football community, which closely follows player conduct issues because of their impact on availability and performance, was particularly vocal about Rice's situation. His average draft position, ADP, had slipped due to the expected suspension, but many analysts noted that he remained a valuable pick if the suspension was short, given his role in the Chiefs' offense alongside Patrick Mahomes. This highlights one of the most frustrating aspects of this entire saga. Despite all of his off-field issues, Rice's talent was so undeniable that teams and fans were still willing to overlook his behavior for the potential benefits he could provide. The victims, meanwhile, were still fighting for justice and struggling with the ongoing consequences of Rice's actions. But as we've seen throughout this story, real accountability has been in short supply. From the initial decision to flee the scene, to the legal maneuvering to avoid serious consequences, to the refusal to pay settlements, Rice's actions have consistently prioritized his own interests over the well-being of his victims. The broader implications of this case extend far beyond one NFL player's bad decisions. This story highlights fundamental problems with how we handle celebrity justice in America, how wealth and influence can insulate people from the consequences of their actions while perpetrators move on with their lives. The case has sparked discussions about athlete responsibility, the dangers of high-performance vehicles, and the need for mentorship programs to guide young players. But discussions aren't enough when people are still suffering from the consequences of actions that should never have happened in the first place. As we wrap up this incredible story, it's important to remember that while Rashee Rice will eventually serve his 30 days in jail, complete his probation, and likely return to making millions of dollars playing football, his victims will be dealing with the physical, emotional, and financial consequences of his actions for the rest of their lives. The 4-year-old boy who's now afraid to get in cars, the victims with permanent injuries who are still fighting for fair compensation, the families whose lives were forever changed by one moment of unthinkable recklessness. They're the ones who will truly pay the price for Rice's actions. And perhaps most disturbing of all is the realization that this pattern of behavior, alleged violence in college, the devastating crash, the nightclub incident, suggests that without serious intervention and real consequences, this story is far from over. The NFL's eventual discipline, whatever form it takes, will be watched closely as a test of whether the league is serious about holding players accountable for behavior that endangers public safety. But based on the pattern we've seen so far, it's hard to be optimistic that justice will truly be served. This has been the complete, unfiltered truth about Rashee Rice and the legal battles that should serve as a warning about the dangers of celebrity culture, wealth inequality in the justice system, and what happens when talented individuals believe they're above the law. Found this information exciting and unbelievable? Be sure to check out other similar and amazing videos on the screen. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.